Racers, Marshall Pruett. We are here at the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. One of my favorite things every year. Jim McCallion, who is the promoter of this, he loves vintage racing, I love vintage racing, and he always comes up with a really amazing class. Last year we had historic GTP and Group C cars. Before that we had Can-Am, Trans Am, Formula Atlantic. This year, historic Formula One. This class run by our friend Chris Vandegrift, the Historic Motorsports Association. We're just going to do a paddock tour looking at pure open wheel racing, adult content. Phenomenal stuff. Right here we have a car that probably, I will be very surprised if my man Danny Baker does not win both races this weekend. The first one on Saturday, the second on Sunday. Danny, who is super quadruple quick. This here with his 1976 McLaren M23. This thing, super rocket. The majority of the cars all powered by the venerable Cosworth DFV double 4 valves. Here you see a little bit of warming of things. Plugged in, trying to get ready to go. We're going to look through the paddock here. I wanted to start with Danny, who I think is going to be the leader, as I said, very likely one of the leaders. But this event has a car here in the corner, Brabham BT44, one of the amazing designs, early designs by Gordon Murray. This is owned by Phil Riley, our beloved friend who we lost last year, late last year. Phil Riley loved this car, driving it. His good friend Dan Marvin, phenomenal pro racer, did a lot of driving in this as well. Obviously, having lost Mr. Riley, who probably built the majority of the Cosworth DFVs in these cars, not here. So in his absence, brought his beloved Brabham BT44. It sits here in a place of honor. And informally, this weekend's events are all in honor of Phil. So love him and miss him. And we unfortunately don't have him here for this, but we do have this glorious BT44. And we start getting into some of the fun Garage East era shadow latter stages of their involvement in Formula One. Believe this is a 79 DN9, could be wrong. You know, actually I think I see some documentation on the back. Hey, look at that, I was right. DN9 2A. Look at the original stickers on the rear wing here, this giant hand-formed aluminum thing. Everybody runs on Avon tires, that being a family that is within a dear friend of mine, Cooper Tires, which is a part of Goodyear. So we are period correct in many ways, kind of sort of. 1976 Lotus, 77, I believe, Mario Andretti. How do you not love life when you're staring at a JPS Lotus? Interesting might be one way to put it. Outboard suspension, doing their best to reduce unsprung weight. Was not uncommon for suspension to be outboard, but what's interesting here, if we look at this 1976 McLaren, you look how wide the chassis is. You see how that suspension, because of all this width, is by and large hidden. You step over here and look at the approach Lotus took. Chassis itself very narrow, but as a result, you got a lot of stuff kind of sort of flapping in the breeze. Got the rocker arm suspension here, vertical dampers, see all the triangulation on the suspension to hold everything in place. Got the anti-roll bar here, coming up and connecting to the drop link at the bottom of this rocker arm out here. A lot going on. And again, by comparison, it's narrower if we look at the tub part, but there's definitely a decent amount of things causing some drag. Also, just in terms of pure glory, double air intake for the DFV, and this gold JPS, right? Just phenomenal. Take a look here at the achievements by a certain Mario Andretti. Vittorio Brambilla here, a delightful March. Know it's a March because of this kind of cowcatcher nose design that they were really fond of. Plus, they put the March sticker there too to make sure you couldn't forget. I believe this is owned by my friend Steve Romack. This being a 1976 March 761. Love the brake ducts here. These cool little scoopity scoops. And since those are indeed attached to the upright, those turn and make sure they're always picking up directly in the oncoming air. Radiator mount, very interesting here. Not only is it the back, technically I guess it's a side pod shape, but not a lot going on there. But the whole idea with the radiator is to expose that hot liquid and have a bit of heat exchanging with the air, so it doesn't necessarily have to be turned 90 degrees and pointed right into the air. As long as this is allowing the heat to escape, that's serving its purpose. But that's not the coolest, most amazing thing here. Air scoop. Look at that, right? Just beautiful period of F1 where you'd get these giant hawking air boxes and air intakes. I mean, you can swallow big birds. I don't know if you're going to get a turkey in there. Do turkeys fly? Les Nessman, I think, did a little experiment with that in the late 70s at a radio station in Cincinnati. But nonetheless, let's look at some America here. John Watson. This car is pretty active in vintage racing for sure. You think about all this is done, this 1976 Penske PC4. This car was put to very good use back in the day. You can also see its owner make sure that they go to a lot of events. So we saw those front brake ducts on the March. Look at these cute tiny little fellas at the back on this PC4. In typical Penske approach, everything is beautiful and tidy. The pinstriping is done right. Everything is nickel plated and polished. So again, just a phenomenal thing to look at the differences here. If we're talking about 3 cars, I take that back, 4 cars made in 1976. Here's the PC4, relatively narrow chassis, but not crazy narrow. Look back at the March, and it is certainly wide, 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 wide. Then we have the narrowest of all with the Lotus, and then as we saw, the wide McLaren here. Just choices to make, who's doing what. Here's a cool car, cool in terms of unique. It was a bit of a poop box if we're talking competitiveness. This is a 1977 BRM P207. Teddy Paulette drove it. Good on Teddy. Teddy did a lot of cool stuff with driving schools and whatnot and educated some folks. I don't know if he was the world's best F1 driver. This was never going to be accused of being the world's best Formula One car. But I do have a great appreciation for machines like this that were never successful in the day, but they were just unique. They wanted to try something different. BRM V12, thankfully. In this year's historic class at Long Beach, everything is a Cosworth DFV except for this piece of V12 Trumpet Glory and an Alfa Romeo we'll get to here in just a little bit. If we're talking like cool liveries, good old Jan Lammers was absolutely fortunate to have one that, yeah, no one really ever wants to forget because it's so cool. Another 79 Shadow DN9. Lammers and Clay Regazzoni drove these in 79, but this is the famous then and still amazing now Samson, or Samson, I always throw the P in there, Samson livery. Look at that. Look at that, right? Old school, but amazing. Look at that. How do you not love this? My friend Terry Malone, the white-haired gentleman in the middle, aka Piggy, he was the chief mechanic on Mario Andretti's Long Beach winning Long Beach F1 Grand Prix car Lotus in 1977. And here he has been holding court with the classic Lotus mechanics, running this glorious early carbon era 1982 Lotus 91, Piggy, as he is known to do, holding court for, I don't know, 20 minutes now. We were meant to do this walk together, but he loves reminiscing. And again, as a factory Lotus Formula One mechanic back in the day, he's right at home speaking with his people. Another quick little nod before we leave. The Shadow, coming here in 1979. This is Formula One, fully entrenched in its ground effects era, using the side pods here and skirts to try and seal the outer edges of the skirts to the ground while they're at speed, and making a quadrillion pounds of downforce. This is the era, it was a couple years before this, 79, but this is really where downforce in motorsports became a thing, this era of Formula One. Let's come back here and take more of a look at this Lotus 91. So if we look at the BRM, for example, the nose detaches, right? These little Zeus fasteners, little quarter turn, they pop off. You got the, I want to really call it an engine cover, it just places right on top of the trumpets there with the screen, but little pieces of bodywork that come off all the cars we've seen so far. We get into this era of Formula One, these bigger composite one-piece body sections. So there's no hashtag front nose to take off. Side pods are exposed through removing this one big piece. I love that about this era. You look at the back, and it's complemented by another big ass piece, the engine cover here with the air filter built in. So here's Piggy. I'll come around. And this is also kind of the end, 82 being the end of ground effects in F1. We're coming up here in just a little bit to the 83. There's at least one car from 83 where you can just see the drastic change in downforce philosophy. Just love the carbon though. Again, 82. This is, as we see here, Austria winner, Elio De Angelis, the late Elio De Angelis. But you can see here with the bodywork removed, you see the side pod. You notice that it starts to ramp up height-wise, building that wing profile into the side pod. So if you look at this rear wing, you say, hey, that's pretty decent size. You go, yeah, but what is that, 6-7 feet long with a wing profile that develops and curves upwards all along the side of the car, left and right. That's why these things made so much downforce. And look at the hatching here in the carbon. This is just sublime. Also look at the size of the roll structure here. That's a long run back. Another part to this era. You can see the refueling port here. Oh, they carried a lot of fuel. They carried a ton. That is why this is so wide from the start here with the bolt for the roll hoop there all the way to the back right here. Just look at the sheer width, how much fuel this was meant to carry. I don't remember the literage, but it's frickin' giant. And here's a little bit more of this cool advancement. This right here, done a lot of videos with this over the years, in car mostly. This being our pal Zach Brown's World Championship winning Alan Jones entry. This being a Williams FW 07, and again, just phenomenal World Championship winner here. We're talking ground effects, really optimal ground effects. Might be able to see here, it's covered over, but here are the radiators. You put the little blanking plate on top so nothing falls in or damages it while you're working. But you do see the somewhat flat-ish floor, and then you see that steep curvature and rise upwards, making gobs of downforce. Always love the Fly Saudi colors here. I always thought these were just really beautiful. Also, just look at this. No disrespect to anybody who's making Formula One cars today, where seemingly everything comes out of an autoclave or is 3D printed or whatever. Just look at this, these giant upper rocker arms and anti-roll bars and everything here that's machined by hand. This would have been pre-computer controlled machining, so this is just a testament to handmade vehicles. Absolutely love this era of Formula One. And then also, if we want to talk bravery, yes, we do have the side pods. This is crushable structure in an impact, but yeah, there's no real side to the cockpit. Your shoulder is kind of the outermost defense, and it's just, whether it would be carbon or fiberglass or some sort of lightweight composite sitting over you, which we have here, is placed on the other side of the car. That's not going to save you in any shape or form if you have a crash. So yes, bravery indeed, a massive part of this DFV era of Formula One. Skip past, well, I didn't intend to, just happened to keep walking, but the oldest car here, this being a Jackie Stewart Tyrrell 004. I mean, come on. How amazing is this? 1971 is when this hot rod is from. This really being super early era of Ken Tyrrell as a manufacturer, constructor. This Tyrrell Ford. If you know your Formula One, love your Formula One, know its history, this is just an iconic vehicle. Not only from the success they had with it, but just the look. Radiator up front, flowing through that somewhat narrow aperture, up out through these two vents here. The channeling on both sides of the cockpit to try and get that hot air to go left and right instead of straight into the driver's face. Little tripod style mirrors, another just iconic aspect of what Tyrrell did. You also gotta love the short wheelbaseness of it. That's not really a word, but I'm making it up right now. But look at most of the other cars, and all the other cars are at least a couple years older, but I mean, it's a relatively short chassis. And if you look at where the chassis really ends here, it's just on the very left of the frame, that seam right there, that's the end of the tub itself, the aluminum tub. You've got a Cosworth DFV almost carrying it like a backpack. You've got a very short transmission on the back, a giant wing that is blocked by some things, but nonetheless is still pretty darn big in size. But if you just look at the overall length of the vehicle, it is fairly short from axle center line to axle center line. That means it's moving around a lot and squirming. And, well, we know they had a ton of success, so that was super cool. And if we're talking about continuing the super cool, I saw this on the entry list, but I guess my head didn't click. This is KK Rosberg's 1982 Formula One World Championship winning Williams. And this FW08, I loved it too. Like that Tyrrell, and this is what, 11 years older? Fairly short and stubby as well. I mean, another big difference, and this is just one of those safety concerns from this era, you look at where Jackie sat, and you know, if we're talking about the car being short front to back, it's because the back is short. Jackie's certainly not a large person at all, but ample space for feet towards the front of the car. A frontal impact would have been a bad thing no matter what, but at least there was a little bit of real estate in front of him. You come to this 92 Rosberg mobile, I mean, you were almost falling out of the car onto the front tires. So thank goodness he was okay. But I've always just loved this car for how clean it is. It's really filled with some crazy angles too. This big, tall roll hoop as well. How cool is this? And this being the final year of ground effects. And oh boy. My friend Ethan Shippert, they just finished this restoration on a 79, also 80 a little bit, Tyrrell Didier Pironi car. Super well-known livery from the time. Love this thing, absolutely love it. This Tyrrell 009, you can just see everything is done right, beautiful. Look at the little anodized rivets being used there, just these little grace notes, but you can see everything here is brand new, perfect and polished and beautiful. It'll go out and run and come back a little less perfect, but that's okay. These are not meant to be perfect machines at all. So let's look at a car that, I wrote about this in the most recent issue of Vintage Motorsport magazine. This Shadow lived in a shop at Sears Point, one or two shops down from where I kind of grew up working in, and it was just chucked in and amongst a bunch of other cars, by no means treated in a special way, because in the late 80s, early 90s, historic F1, at least here, wasn't really a thing. Now it is just held aloft with reverie. But what is a little bit crazy about this Shadow is you have to understand that for its time, this did not exactly have what we would consider to be a whole bunch of safety. I think this is a DN8, but if we're talking about things that might concern you just a little bit, it's like a roller skate. Look how low this is. You obviously have a side pod with a little bit of crushable structure, but I mean, there's nothing there. Anything coming at you quickly from the side, yeah, let's just not talk about that. But I mean, you look at what a person is strapping into, and it is just this tiny narrow area. You've got to slide in and pop your feet under the steering rack here, under the steering rack, to access the pedals. I mean, it's just a narrow person and a person with great dexterity would have to come in here and do this. And then you also just think about the fact that with some of these crashes where the front of the car gets pushed back or peeled back, your feet are kind of wedged in there in a mildly concerning way. Here we're very thankful to have a non-DFV powered machine so we can hear something other than a howling V8. 1982 Alfa Romeo Andrea de Cesaris, aka de Crasherus, and a naturally aspirated V12. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We talk about the built-in air filter. How pretty is that? A little bit of green mesh, looks like something you might have in your garden. Then beneath that, the air filter itself. But I love seeing machines like this that are just a little bit off the beaten DFV path here in vintage racing. And so again, thankfully, this 1982 Alfa Romeo 182. Also again, since this is 82, the last year of ground effects, you're getting these big honking side pods feeding a lot of air, firing all the way back with a smooth top as well. And coming out the back here to make downforce. Hey, hey. Say hi, Ethan.
Oh, hey, how we doing?
Good, you're supposed to say hi, Ethan, but that's okay.
Sorry, yeah, let's go find something. Never been the quickest.
It's okay. Well, you actually have. You're a fairly quick race car driver. We love our pal, Ethan Shippert. He's not only quick like a bunny in race cars, but he and his shop do a phenomenal job restoring and running a lot of really cool race cars. Here, take a look at this. I mean, come on. Ronnie Peterson. Who could you ask for more than this? Giant wing. Just love the look of this for sure. How do you not just love these lines? I'm just going to stare at it for a minute. But nonetheless, this March really not only loved this car throughout the years, looking at photos of it, vintage races of it, doing its business. This car gets around to vintage races a decent amount, right? Not a crazy amount, but a decent amount. So it's kind of what this whole idea is, right? Don't keep these things hidden away, locked away. Let folks see them and enjoy them. And this absolutely fits the bill. Let's get to our last couple of cars here. This is going to be one of the longer posts we have, but that's okay. We're looking at some more amazingness here. Hans Stuck. And come on. First of all, I love me a Hans Stuck, anything. The guy is just the best ever. But also, airbox, right? And I mean, we're talking some real Jägermeister promotions here. Look at the size of the rear wing. Like, this is 2 IndyCar rear wings, or if not more. And then look at, but hey, let's cool some oil. Okay, and let's put 27 different brackets and braces and whatever. And this just, once again, fits the era of buy a car, run it, do with it kind of sort of as you please. Look at this horizontal, or this piece running here, strengthening bar to make sure nothing wobbles and shakes and falls apart too much. Oh boy, how do you not want to climb into one of these? Glorious March yet again. These are really popular, among the most popular customer cars of the day, and go and do big things. We have another Tyrrell, another sweet Peroni car. McLaren, friend Tony from Robin Automotive, he was just laying down earlier putting stickers on this, an old, I think what, 80 or so Alan Prost car maybe. Yeah, 1980 McLaren M30. Ground effects yet again. And you never have to wonder if a car is from the ground effects era, because it always reveals itself with the size of the side pods. This as well attempts to do a little bit of skirting along the side here. And then let's close with the newest car, this one being driven by our pal Patrick Long. There's the amazing Mark Wida. Say hi, Mark.
Hi, Marshall.
Hi there. Worked with Mark a couple times in IndyCar, Indy Lights, taught me a bunch when I was trying to be less dumb engineer. 1983 Williams FW08C. So here we go, 1982, as we mentioned, ground effects, giant side pods, making all that downforce. And in 1 year, we come to 1983, and where did the side pods go? There is still technically a side pod here at the back, but the whole giant structure to build and gather air completely gone. So Pat's going to be driving this. Hopefully we'll do a visor cam or something with him at some point in time. And before we go, let's talk about one of the things that's still stupidest in Formula One: shadow plates. So they had rules that said no bodywork could extend out past anything, and so as a result, they said, you know, you would be running illegal if you could see the shadow of that mirror, for example, extending downward. So what did Formula One decide to say? Well, shadow plates. Anything that protrudes outward from the primary bodywork must be covered. And so this was a common practice where teams had to manufacture little things that jutted out from the bottom to cover off whatever little thing might be protruding out somewhere, all because Formula One decided, well, that's a rule. And as we know, rules are silly and I hate them, but I hope you enjoyed our long and lazy walk here through the historic F1 paddock. Keep an eye out for this weekend. None of it's streaming that I know of, but we're going to try and do some in-car stuff. And if I can wander out to a corner or two with one of my video cameras, I'll try and post a little something for you, just to make sure that all this goodness that we get to see here live in Long Beach is something that you can enjoy at home as well.